Hello, everyone. My name is Simone Wright, and I will start off this recording with a brief description of myself. I am a Black woman living in Canada. My hair is black, and I wear it in its natural curly, kinky state. And it is currently styled in a two-strand twist hairstyle. So it looks like a lot of mini tiny ropes twisted all over my head. I'm also wearing some jewelry. I love gold and I love pearls. So I'm wearing some pearl earrings and pearl necklaces and gold necklaces as well. I'm currently wearing an African print shirt from Benin. So it is a fuchsia pink shirt with navy blue and green kind of worm-like patterns all over it. I'm currently sitting in my living room, and behind me on the wall are framed albums of artists who are really important to me, especially from my childhood. So artists such as Prince, Michael Jackson, Sade, David Bowie, and a few others. So today I'm going to be talking about something that is very dear and important to me. And it's a nonprofit that I started called Pardon the Roots. So Pardon the Roots is a platform that I created to talk about the history, the significance, and the politics of Black hair. And I created this because myself, a Black woman who wears her hair in its natural state, I've been in the corporate world for almost 20 years, and I have dealt with hair discrimination and microaggressions within the workplace, from managers and directors telling me that my box braids weren't professional, to me hearing stories of friends and friends of friends having been told that they have to shave their locks off in order to be considered for promotions. But what really pushed me to do this platform, Pardon the Roots, was I was part of a workplace diversity training session. And the session was on the topic of covering, so individuals not bringing their whole self into the workplace. And there's different aspects of covering, and one of them is appearance. So the example that was given for appearance was a Black woman straightening her hair to hide her appearance. Now, there is some validity with that statement, but the facilitator didn't provide any kind of historical references or context behind that blanket statement. And it was myself and another Black woman in this training session who was a friend of mine. And what she did was she emailed the facilitator afterwards and thanked her for her time, and did let her know that she was offended by the comment about Black women straightening their hair to hide their appearance, because there's a lot of reasons why we straighten our hair. The facilitator was a bit defensive and said she did her gut check and sent the article or the research that she got the information from. And my friend and I reread the report. And prior to the statement of Black women straightening their hair to hide their appearance, it talked about the history of after slavery, Black people had to compete in a world that was not created for them or by them. And ways for them to be able to compete was by altering their appearance. So lightening their skin or straightening their hair to adhere to European beauty ideal standards. That was the reason why they straightened their hair. So in my conversation today with you guys, I'm going to briefly walk you through the history of Black hair and provide some facts and even my own personal lived experience with wearing my hair in its natural state. So at this point, I'm going to share my screen and walk you through my presentation. So as I mentioned, the platform, Pardon the Roots, it's all about educating people about the history, the significance, and the politics behind Black hair. So we're going to start off by the journey and the politics of our roots. So from a very young age, I knew that hair in my family was something that was very important. It was part of our identity. And this is something that is very integral and ingrained in Black history and Black culture. And our hair, this is during or before pre-colonial times in Africa, our hair was used as a messenger. So it was like a silent language. So each of the different tribes within Africa wore different styles. And even with the individuals within the tribes, they wore different hairstyles. And it signified your status within the tribe. So if you were someone who was going out to war, you would have a certain hairstyle. If you were someone in mourning, you had a different hairstyle. If you were someone who was about to get married, you had like a particular hairstyle. So our hair was a way for us to communicate between tribes and even within the tribes itself. So our hair is considered to be divine. And it's considered to be divine because hair is the most elevated part of your body, meaning it's the closest to the gods. And hairdressing was and still is a very important process and routine within the Black community. And because our hair is considered divine, you'd always have a trusted member within your community doing your hair. And the different tools that were used during these times were wooden combs and oils such as palm oil. And similar to what we see with the barbershops and the hair salons today, the task of hairdressing, it was really an act of communities to get together. It was an opportunity to share stories and to bond with one another. Now, we're going to talk about the impact of the transatlantic slave trade on Black hair. So this was an atrocity and a devastation to the Black community, and it really impacted the rich traditions and rituals that we did, especially when it came to our hair maintenance. So the images that you see on the screen on the left-hand side, you do see the Europeans, Brandon, and enslaved African. So those were some of the steps that were done as they were preparing the enslaved Africans to bring them to the New World. But they also did things such as shaving their hairs. And this was a way or the starting of the erasure of culture. So shaving one's hair, as I mentioned in the previous slides, our hair was a messenger. So this was a way to end all that kind of communication between one another. And it was also said that it was done for hygienic reasons. So upon the arrival into the quote unquote New World, the enslaved Africans, they faced a lot of long, grueling hours, and they lived in very, very disastrous environments that were rampant with lice, disease, you name it. And the practice of their hair maintenance was removed because they didn't have the time, nor did they have the actual tools that they used in Africa to do their hair. So a lot of them had to resort to using metal brush that were used for sheep to detangle their hair. And they had to resort to using leftover grease from cooking to moisturize their hair. And you'll notice within the middle and the right image, the enslaved Africans, they are wearing what is called head wraps. So these were leftover cloths that they would use to wrap their hair to protect their hair from any elements from the sun, from bugs, but also because their hair, a lot of them did suffer from hair loss and scalp damage as a way to protect their hair. And also too, it was kind of a shame that the beautiful crowns that they had, that they really were showcasing within Africa, it wasn't in the same condition. So also the wrapping of the hair was a form of, covering themselves out of shame. So the Tenon Law was a law that was implemented in 1786. And this was the first form of policing of Black hair. So African mixed race Creole women particularly living in the southern United States, they would, if they had time, adorn their hair with different ornaments that they would find. So sometimes it would be seashells or any kind of beads that they would find. And at this time, any kind of interracial relationships were deemed illegal. But because these Black women were adorning their hair, they were enticing white men. And because of that, that was a no-no during those times. This law was implemented where anytime a Black woman was going out into public, she would have to wrap her hair in these cloths. So this is what is called the Tenon-Law. But, you know, being the resilient people that we are, these Black women, they took this travesty and turned it into triumph and created these beautiful, gorgeous pieces of art with these head wraps. And a lot of us still wear these head wraps up until today. But it was originally a law to cover who we are and to cover our appearance. So the next section that I'm going to go through is called the politics of appearance. And this really ties into the comment that facilitator made in regards to Black people straightening their hair to hide their appearance. So after emancipation or the abolishment of slavery, appearance did play a huge role within Black people in North America and within the Caribbean. And although they were considered free, air quote, they still were at a disadvantage and they had to find ways to fit in and to compete. So wearing one's hair in natural hairstyles, such as braids, it was deemed ignorant, old-fashioned. It was really associated with slavery. So this was the time where Black people really created concoctions such as lightening their skin tone and straightening their hair in order to fit in and also to make white people feel comfortable. So it was during this time that a lot of innovations were created to heighten or improve your appearance. So on the right-hand side of this slide, or sorry, on the left-hand slide, you will see it's a metal comb. And this is a hot comb. So you'd hold this comb, like the metal teeth, into an open flame, heat it up, and then you would kind of pat it off just to cool it just a little bit on a towel, and then you would comb it through your hair. So it would turn kinky, coily hair into straight hairstyles. There are other concoctions, like chemical concoctions, that were created, but a lot of these had really negative side effects that would burn and damage people's scalps, burn their hair off, and cause a lot of permanent damage. So the politics of appearance still exists today. And, you know, especially when it comes to the school and the workplace, there's certain perceptions of what is considered professional versus unprofessional. And on the screen that I have here on the left-hand side are hairstyles that are considered professional. So you see it's really images of white women with straighter hairstyles. And on the right-hand side, it's the images that are considered unprofessional, and the majority of the images are Black women with either braids or with curly hairstyles. So this was a study that was shared within The Guardian. And a lot of times when you are in certain spaces, like people will perceive you based off of how your hair looks. And, you know, in regards to if you're going to be accepted or not. We do see a lot of changes are happening in this space, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And I'm going to share this study with you. This was done by Unilever, who is part of the Crown Act. That is an act to protect individuals, particularly Black individuals, to wear their hair in its natural state. So on this slide, what I have is 4 images of Black women. So starting off, the first one, it's a Black woman wearing an afro. The second image is a Black woman wearing long box braids. So these are just like long individual braids. The third image is a Black woman who is wearing a blonde wavy weave. And then the fourth image is a Black woman with a very short, straight bob. So in this study, it asked individuals of the hairstyles that I just described and I have on my screen, which is considered to be perceived most unprofessional, which would get the lowest rating. And the one that received the lowest rating in regards to it being deemed professional is the box braids, so the long individual braids. And then followed by that, it's the Afro hairstyle. So it's the blonde weave and the straight short bob that is perceived more professional. So they didn't have as high of a ranking in regards to it being unprofessional. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in regards to the acceptance of natural hair. So we're going to get into the politics of the Black hair business. Now, a lot of people have heard of Madam C.J. Walker. She is one of the first self-made female millionaires in America. And at the time, this was a Black woman, so this was a big deal. And she created her own hair care line. But the true pioneer behind the Black hair care business is Annie Turnbow Malone. And Annie, she was a Black philanthropist, and she also created her own hair care line and was one of the early adopters of the Avon sales agent system, where she would have sales agents go door to sell her products. And interesting fact is Madam C.J. Walker, she was actually a student of Annie Turnbow Malone. She did attend her hair college and was a sales agent for her as well. So I wanted to call out Annie because a lot of the time she is overshadowed by Madam C.J. Walker, that she is one of the true pioneers. And the name of the company that she had, it's called Poro. And it's interesting because it's a Mende word, so it's a West African word, and it means devotional society. And considering that during this time, it was when, Black people, they weren't really embracing their African roots, but this is just a great story to see that a Black woman was really embracing her African roots during this time. And I wanted to add a Canadian lens to this. We have Viola Desmond. She is one of the earlier Black hair business owners within Canada. And she is also the individual who started the civil rights movement in Canada. So she was a student of Madam C.J. Walker. She had to go to school in the US for beauty because the beauty schools in Canada, they weren't integrated, so they weren't accepting Black students. And Viola came back to Canada, and she did what a lot of people would say is the start of the civil rights movement within Canada. She went to a movie theater and sat in the white-only section, refused to give up her seat, and was arrested. And it was during that time that she really started the civil rights movement within Canada. And she is always called the Rosa Parks of Canada. But what she did by preventing to give up her seat happened in 1946, which was 9 years before Rosa Parks gave up her seat in the US. So just an interesting fact. So with the Black hair care business, it really started to come about at the turn of the 20th century. And this was because a lot of Black people were starting to move into bigger cities, and they're starting to be more involved in the community by going to social groups, by going to churches, as well as entering the workforce. So the act of hair care and maintenance started to blossom again. And this is where we really saw the rise of the Black hair care salons, the Black barbershops, and like products that were marketed towards Black people. And it was also an opportunity to employ Black people as well. But you know, during this time, a lot of white businesses started to see the boom in the Black hair care business, and they just tried to take share from that. But it wasn't very successful for them. So on this slide, what I have is it's two advertisements of Black hair care products. On the left-hand side, it's a white-owned company by the name of Hydra. And the statement says, could this girl vamp your sweetie? So it's asking, could this Black woman with her wavy hair, could she steal your man? Versus the advertisement on the right-hand side, which is Madam C.J. Walker, a Black-owned company, is asking the question, if you want the beauty of complexion and the loveliness of hair, try Madam C.J. Walker's products. So the white hair care companies, their advertising was very demoralizing. It wasn't confidence boosting. So a lot of Black people, they did not convert to purchasing the white-owned Black hair care products just due to the fact that they weren't advertising to them. They were really demeaning them versus the Black hair care companies and their ads. It was empowering for the community. So just a quick tidbit of information. So this is Nielsen HomeScan data. So it's POS data, and it's looking at the power of Black dollars. So when you look at the ethnic hair and beauty aids category, the total spend is $63 million. And when you look at the spend for Black people within that category, it's 54 million. So almost 86% of those dollars are coming from Black dollars. So it's a huge business. It's a huge opportunity for people to get into this market because there's a lot of dollars to be spent here. So we're going to get into the politics of style versus statement. And so this is where you start to see the start of the Black natural hair movement. So with the surge of the civil rights movement from the late 50s into the 60s, Black people really started to wear their hair in its natural state. So on the screen here, I have Cicely Tyson and Nina Simone wearing braids and afros. So you had these actresses and singers, and then you also had the Black Panther Party, so the image on the left, started to really embrace their African roots. And it was both a way for a political statement, but also a way for them to embrace their African roots. And this is where you really start to see the act of respectability politics come into play, because a lot of Black people during this time had tensions between the ones who wore their hair in straighter hairstyles and the ones who wore their hair in more natural hairstyles. Because with respectability politics, it's all about, you know, if you look and present yourself in a certain way, you'll be treated a certain way. So we really started to see those tensions in regards to, do you adhere to your true authentic self, or do you alter yourself to be treated better? So throughout the late 60s and early 70s, we really started to see the change in media and how Black people were being presented. So on the slide, I have images of a McDonald's and a Coca-Cola ad where Black people are wearing afros. And on the right-hand side, we have a Clairol hair ad where this is a white-owned company, and they had started to create products specifically for natural hairstyles. So with this particular product, it helps to free the fro or make the fro add more volume to it, make it bigger. So I have the statement here, and this is something that a lot of us Black individuals in the corporate world feel and deal with. So this statement says, I have to change my hair from its natural state to fit in at the office. And this is going to be showing a percentage of Black women who feel this way, and it's 80%. So 80% of Black women feel that they have to change their hair from its natural state in order to fit in the office. And that should not be the case, because people should be able to feel free to wear their hair however they want to wear it. You know, wearing it in the way that it grows out of your head naturally should not be an issue, but it is an issue for a lot of us. And this is why a lot of new laws and rules have been implemented within government and within organizations. So we are moving from more of a resistance into a movement right now. And the Black consciousness has been elevated, especially since the murder of George Floyd, where Black people, they really are owning up to their identity and their Blackness. And they're making noise about it, and people are listening. So I believe it was about 3 or 4 years, the Crown Act was implemented, and Crown stands for Creating a Respectful and Open either World or Workplace for Natural Hair. So this act has been implemented in the US, where I believe it's now 11 states that has implemented this act to protect Black people to wear their hair in its natural state. And Unilever in the UK has implemented the Crown Act as well. And this is, again, a way for people within Unilever to wear their hair in its natural state. Now, I've come to the end of my presentation. I know it was a quick overview, but I hope that you found the history of our hair and the reasons why we do what we do with our hair enlightening and understanding, some of the issues that we deal with and where it's rooted from. And I just want to leave a few, pointers and tips for people who are listening in. And a lot of times with Black people, we do feel othered, within the school system, within the workplace, when we have people asking us questions, like, how often do you wash your hair? Or, can I touch your hair? Or if they're touching your hair, they're telling you your hair, feels like a sponge or it's too greasy. Like, these are a lot of things that I've dealt with and things that family and friends have dealt with. And, it really does make us feel othered. It does, feel like people are invading our space, especially when you're touching someone's hair. You are impeding on that person's personal space. So I just want to, leave you all with understanding, when you're being frequently asked these questions or, told these comments, it's kind of like death by 1,000 cuts. It's all about the frequency of it. Like, you might not think that someone asking you how you wash your hair might not be a big deal, but when it's being constantly asked, it really does, impede on your self-confidence. I know people are curious about our hair. And, the thing that I would say is that if you are curious, ask us, but, do it in a respectful way. A lot of times you could just, take a Black person that you see, one-on-one outside of like a big group and ask them questions, as opposed to, like asking in a big group and, that person just feels, zeroed in or othered out from everyone else. So it's really about, like empathy and just being respectful of people. And, don't be afraid to ask questions. People, we know that our hair is different. We know that there is curiosity, but it's the delivery and, the way that you are approaching people and asking questions. So I hope that you have found this, again, enlightening. You have learned something. Again, my name is Simone Wright. These are the sources of the information that I used for this presentation. And if you have any questions, please contact me on my Instagram at Pardon the Roots. So thank you again for your time and have a blessed day.